So I just want to welcome everyone here tonight to our Safe Sport webinar. I am Pamela Adler, the Director of Talent Operations in Safe Sport, and
I'm Jules Zane. I'm the Director of Member Services and the Director of the Referee Program. Some quick things to note. If you have a question that you would like us to answer in this Q&A that we're going to go through some questions on screen. But if you have questions that you want us to consider, to talk about in front of the group, use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. That's a little easier for us to monitor than the chat, because that's a way for us to mark unanswered questions so far, whereas the chat will just continue going. So please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen once we are underway. If you have a question or so, I'll be monitoring that. Also, if my video gets choppy, I'm having some internet troubles tonight, but for now, so far, so good. So Pam, if you want to get going.
So we are having this webinar because there's been some policy changes at the U.S. Center for Safe Sport. Just for anyone that doesn't know, the center was created by Congress, and Congress designated them as the authority to respond to reports of sexual misconduct for any sport that falls under the Olympic movement. And I'm not going to read this for you, but we will be publishing this slideshow after if you want to learn more about why the center exists and how NGBs, US Rowing being one of them, falls under this umbrella. My face is in the way of this. I don't know if you guys can see my face in the way of this, but so in 2020, 2021, the US Center for Safe Sport updated their minor athlete abuse prevention policies. Many people think that Safe Sport relates only to minors, but in fact, Safe Sport was created for all kinds of misconduct. Adult to adult, for example, can happen. Adult to minor, minor to adult, minor to minor. Any kind of combination you unfortunately can think of will happen. They, because they made changes to their minor athlete abuse prevention policies, they had all national governing bodies update their own Safe Sport policies. The center then reviewed them all, and we have now published what will go into effect January 1st, 2022. There are some new definitions that were added by the center. These are in our policy for 2022, which is currently on our website. They're not in the current policy. Some of those new definitions are dual relationship exception. For example, if you have a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old sharing a room, there's exceptions. The parent guardian would have to approve that because it's a minor sharing with an adult, but there are exceptions. In-program contact, basically meaning if you're an adult and you have in-program contact with a minor, there's requirements for that. Partial or full jurisdiction applies to any space or facility owned by US Rowing or its clubs or the USOPC. A personal care assistant would be if you're, for example, a Paralympian and you need someone to help you with your activities of daily living. Regular contact, if you're a volunteer who shows up to the boathouse every day to help your athletes, bring the launch into the water or something like that, you have regular contact. And a minor athlete is anyone under the age of 18.
And I think it's worth noting that when it comes to the Center for Safe Sport and when it comes to some of this reporting, age is not rowing age. Obviously, we use rowing age in our sport. A lot of sports use certain age categories like U19. In this case, when we talk about a minor, we specifically mean someone who is actually 17 and the moment they turn 18, the day they turn 18, they are considered legally an adult by the center as well. So rowing age is not a factor in this.
Just to help you guys understand a little bit more, this slide was taken directly from the US Center for Safe Sport, and it's kind of showing what in-program contact means. So if anybody ever have questions, this will help. Another thing that the center changed from previous policies to now is they really did a deep dive into what are one-on-one interactions and how can we limit that. And they changed things to basically anytime an adult has a one-on-one interaction with a minor, there needs to be someone else there. For example, a coach and a minor athlete can't have a one-on-one meeting that is behind closed doors and private. It needs to be observable, interruptible. If there's massages or rub down, a parent or guardian must consent, and someone must be there as well. Same thing with locker rooms and changing areas. Adults cannot be there if minors are changing. The electronic communication policy was really a big change. It used to just apply to social media, but now it applies to all kinds of electronic communications, basically because more and more are being created every day. But basically, if you are an adult, you cannot have a one-on-one conversation via electronic communication with a minor. There has to be other people on the text chain or email or however you're communicating. The transportation policy, it used to be separated into local travel, which meant your day-to-day travel back and forth to your boathouse, and team travel, which was when you're going away for an event. It's now just become one transportation policy where if you are a parent driving to the boathouse, or if you are a parent driving to an event and you're driving kids around that are not your own offspring, or you're not the guardian of them, there has to be written consent from all of those other parent and guardians. The lodging policy used to be called team travel. That is basically when you're going away for an event. Minor athletes, if they're going to be rooming with adults, again, that 17 and 18-year-old example, there needs to be written consent by the parent. This is just some of them.
And Pamela, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a good way, if you're wondering, well, what is a practical way to do that? There are clubs who get a waiver at the beginning of the season or a written agreement in which parents can agree to, travel being handled by other parents or, approved volunteers of the club for that season. You put in a time window, and on the same document, you can say that parents consent to a close in age minor and adult, kind of room sharing as well. So it's not something where you have to get approval every single specific instance that pops up for you and your program. You can get approval that people are comfortable with this and kind of, build a framework of what that looks like once a year, or really at the beginning when someone joins your club, and just take that from there. That I think, we get some questions sometimes about like, what's the best way to do that? And this seems to be a very practical way for clubs to take care of it.
Most clubs typically have like a welcome package, and in that welcome package are all of the consent forms, the medical forms that some of your clubs require, swimming forms, et cetera, et cetera. If you need help creating consent forms, the U.S. Center for Safe Sport has a great tool where they offer a lot of sample policies, and U.S. Rowing also can offer assistance if needed.
Okay, Pamela, if we could, I don't know if we can get an attendee list, but there were a couple of people who asked, will the slides be available, and do we have examples of a waiver form like this? I know that we do, or that we can, also just help kind of create them. And that, yeah, so we can certainly provide that. And like Pamela said, there are on the Safe Sport websites models and templates for what that looks like. And yes, we are making these slides available. That was one of the questions as well. And can consent be done electronically during registration? Yeah, if your club has an electronic policy to do that, or people just want to email you, like parents can email you, something like that, that works. That's fine. It doesn't have to be a physical signature. If it's a digital thing and you have some sort of digital item, that's good to go as well. Some people have been using the raise their hand feature because of stability and the amount of attendees. We're trying to do this through the Q&A. So if you could spell out your question for us, that's a little easier to answer. Pamela, another question here. Someone says, we have a rental side of operations like recreational boats and stand-up paddle boards. The staff does not have rowing interactions, but they are present at the public boathouse for their shifts. Do those employees have to go through safe sport training?
That is a very good question that I actually do not know the answer to, but I will ask the center directly. If they're members of the club or if they're adult participants, the typical answer would be yes. But if they're only there because you're renting them a stand-up paddleboard for an hour or something like that, they would typically only need to be aware of what is the minor athlete abuse prevention policy. There's a 2-page PDF on the US Rowing website. They're not going to have to take training to come down to rent a paddleboard or a kayak or something for an hour.
Yeah, and for those of you who were perhaps at the Summer National Championship that we did this summer, you might have seen that we had basically large posters that we kind of staked in the ground, etc. That's a good way to do that as well. Like as long as you can have your policy very visible for the people who don't take the training, that's acceptable as well.
If those posters that were created for summer are actually available on our website, that you can print them out and put them up in your boathouse or wherever for people to just see. And we made them user friendly with pictures and stuff. So
yeah,
a quick glance and you'll get all the info.
Yeah, Pamela, I know a couple of questions are probably going to come up, but maybe we can work through some of them and then just skip them when we get to it.
Yeah.
Question here is, are Regatta LOCs responsible for compliance? And if so, how do we check safe sport compliance? Well, currently, yes. So a Regatta LOC to a certain degree is responsible for compliance, as is the club and as is US Rowing, which is why, at least if you're doing your event through Regatta Central, you're going to have the feature where you can see someone's compliance status right now, and it's currently just membership and waiver. What we are working on with Regatta Central is to basically add whether or not someone is safe sport trained as another column in that report, and just make it part, if they're adults, make it part of US Rowing compliance overall. With that comes a question where someone says, if someone chooses not to do safe sport, who's a member of an organization that is a member, besides not being able to attend the US Rowing event, are there other repercussions? Yeah, we're going to make it mandatory for someone to be a member of US Rowing. If they are an adult, they will have to take safe sport training. And so if someone is not a member in good standing and something happens that member is responsible for, our insurance might not respond, and certainly US Rowing would not recommend that it does. So as a club, if that person is an adult and they are not safe sport trained and something happens at your club and it's proven that that person was perhaps a witness to something, or they could have prevented something and they didn't because you let their training slide, that could have repercussions. And those repercussions are not just a person can't come to a US Rowing event. There could be legal repercussions for them or for their club, to the point that US Rowing's insurance program, which the majority of clubs opt into, has a sexual abuse and molestation policy that applies if a member is a member in good standing and something occurs to them, or there is another sort of incident of that sort. If someone is not safe sport trained and they were supposed to be safe sport trained, it's very likely that the insurance would not do much for them, which could get very expensive. So repercussions are beyond US Rowing not wanting you to participate. Repercussions could be legal repercussions or financial repercussions if that was something that could have been prevented if they knew what to do. Another question, Pamela, was, what about masters only clubs? And I think you touched on this earlier. Safe sport doesn't just take on minor cases. So one of the changes to the policy, and why a lot of sports are, why a lot of sports really are gonna do this and are gonna make every single adult of their sport, every single adult that's with their NGB go through this training, is because there's mandatory, differ state by state, but also it's very, it's important that an adult knows what to do if they observe inappropriate behavior. And something that I kind of, like touched on, I think in a previous webinar, but sometimes I get emails from people who I tell they have to take the training and they say, well, are you suggesting that I'm a creep? No, but I am certainly suggesting that there are creeps out there, and I want you to be empowered and to know what to do if you observe inappropriate behavior. And so the big change is that in the past, I think the Center for Safe Sport was more focused on minors. And in terms of the way the policy was written, it was very much like, if you're in contact with minors or if you work with minors. And without getting into any detail, a lot of the cases we see do not actually involve minors. They are adult versus adult. And Safe Sport will take on those cases. And one of the questions in those cases can be, hey, were they trained? Did they have to be trained and were they not? Because that is all a factor when they judge your case. And so if you are a masters only club, unfortunately, the way they view the policy moving forward, it's a major change, and all adults at your club, in order to be members in good standing of US rowing and really under any NGB for any sport, are going to have to take this. And you might wonder, like, really, is this everyone else? Yeah, like if you go to USA Hockey's website right now and you look up what you need to do to be a member of USA Hockey and play in a sanctioned league, it says you have to take safe sport training if you're 18 years or older. So this isn't US rowing pushing this out and being like, hey, we're going to go our own way. This is really something that's largely happening at basically every governing body under the Olympic movement. This is unfortunately because of what we're seeing, what they're seeing, just the trend, and that's what we got to do.
So obviously we're asking you all to take education and training, and good news, there's some changes to that. Health professionals will have their own course that will be recognized by the Center and US Rowing. The training cycle has changed. It used to be a lot more challenging, but it's now, there's the core program that if you've never taken safe sport training before, you'll take the core training, which is about 90 minutes. And then the following 3 years, it's a refresher course, which is less than half an hour each. You take one refresher course, and then you repeat that training cycle. We will be offering parent training. It's not required if they're not adult participants, but we offer parent training, obviously, because we want them to be aware of how to recognize misconduct. And the same for volunteers. If they're not volunteers that are regular volunteers, but they just show up one day, for your fall picnic and they're handing out hot dogs or whatever, we're not going to ask them to take training. But again, we want them to be aware of what this is all about. So there is training for them, not required. We could just show them the poster of this is what the minor athlete abuse prevention policy is, and this is what you do if you need to report. But it is out there and it is optional for those that want to educate themselves and learn more and know how to see something, say something, so to speak. Obviously, there's exemptions that the center will take on a case-by-case basis, and they do make accommodations for people with disabilities. The U.S. Center for Safe Sport changed their learning management system in April, and some people have logged in and taken the new training on the new site, and some haven't done that yet. So there's 2 ways to get into this new training, and this information is on the U.S. Rowing website. But I've listed it here in this slideshow. The slideshow we're going to publish as well after the webinar. And now we get to the frequently asked questions. Some of these we've touched on, and I'm sure there's more, but we'll just go through and seriously, any questions you have, this is what we're here for tonight. We want to help you. We want to educate you. We want to make sports safer. So we already talked about this, but an adult is really anybody over the age of 18. It's not your rowing age, it's your actual living, breathing age. You can take training before you turn 18 with parental consent. How is training accessed? That was on the previous slide, but the information is here as well. There is minor athlete training, which is optional, and unfortunately, it does not count towards the required adult training. It's geared specifically to your age group. For example, there's middle school training, there's high school training. We've touched on this before, but I'll repeat. Regular volunteers, such as parents, do they need to take training? if you have regular contact with minors, yes, you will need to take training. Sorry. The good news is US Rowing is in the process of developing a $0 membership for volunteers in 2022. So there is no cost. Once you're a US Rowing member, the Safe Sport training is free. This is for participants that are not athletes, are not coaches, are not board members. They're really just parent volunteers or people that don't row or have anything really to do with rowing beyond volunteering.
Okay, Pam, I want to do a couple of questions that are in the in the Q&A here. One is if parents are arranging a carpooling group from and to practice with no involvement from the club with written consent, or is that just something that they're doing on their own? My hunch would be if it's not club organized, then that is the decision of the parents, correct? It's not for the clubs to monitor.
It's not necessarily for the clubs to monitor, but if you're driving back and forth to the boathouse, then it is part of the club. So I would recommend that the parents sign a consent form.
Yeah, okay. Well, someone asked, can Safe Sport be taken as a group? No, the answer is no. There's not currently a group training. It's an individual training. With that, someone asked, let's see, has Safe Sport stated if they will make getting to certifications more user-friendly? More importantly, will clubs get access to being able to check who has completed the certifications like you can with waivers on Regatta Central rosters? Yeah, so it's already a feature like that, which we're currently kind of streamlining. But if you log into your club profile on the US Rowing database, you click on roster, you will see that you can select people in your active roster that you can like kind of list as an applicable adult, which until January 1 is the appropriate term. And then there is an applicable adults tab, and you can actually see, as long as they're connected the right way to the database, you can see the status of those people. Safe Sport quite recently switched to a new learning management system. There are some hiccups on their end. I'm being, Pam is laughing because I'm being very diplomatic about this. We've certainly recognized that the system has not necessarily been the easiest and the switch has not been the smoothest, but long story short, yes, seeing certifications and seeing completion status will become a feature in the US Rowing database and with Regatta Central. Is training completion automatically forwarded to your member account, or is it still manual? The answer is it's not on your profile, but your club can see it. Also, if you're a referee, we can look it up, for example. Yeah, it's going to be automated. We're not there yet, but I think that by January 1, we certainly will be. So that's a work in progress. How do you tell who's not a rower? Yeah, we're going to have a membership, like Pamela said. We're going to implement a membership when this policy becomes the policy. The membership, there will be a special membership for staff and volunteers. We're going to come up with a name that will signal that that person is not a rower and hasn't signed up for rower coverage, part because I'm sure there are going to be people who are going to try and row by picking the $0 option, although that is certainly not for them. So yes, there will be a very specific designated membership that will cost for you as a club or for the person using it, and you'll be able to see that on your roster. So let's see. There were a couple of questions. What if I'm associated with multiple clubs? Does your training follow? Yes, it does. Should people who have taken Safe Sport training wait until January? No, because the training is not changing. And an important thing that I want to state about that as well is some of you might have done the training for the first time this year, or you may have done it a few years ago, and it was always kind of similar training every time. They have made a very positive and somewhat recent change to the training methods, which is that you take about a 90-minute core training right now when you start out the first time, but then for 3 straight years, you are eligible for a refresher course, which if you paid attention you did it and you remembered some of it, takes as little as 15 minutes to complete. So we're not actually continuing to ask people to take a 90-minute to 2-hour course every year or every fall or whenever you're going to do that. It really is a lengthy course once every 4 years and a 15, 20-minute endeavor every year for 3 straight years in between. So they have made it quite a lot easier to do that. So certainly no, if you have people who you think this is going to apply to, go for it. A question here is, if someone takes safe sport training for USA Hockey, is there a way to count that for US Rowing? Yes, if you can just send, if that person wants to send us their downloaded certificate, they're working on making it connectable with multiple NGBs at the same time. On Save Sport end, it currently doesn't do that. But if you can download it and send us the PDF, we certainly recognize that as being. A question is, will US Rowing campers under the age of 18 be required to do Safe Sport? No, they're not adults, so no, not mandatory. The link for NCSI for the individual background check requires a number. USA Hockey has a number that's automatic for registered coaches. Is there a number for US Rowing? There is. US Rowing has an enrollment key. It's posted on our website on the Safe Sport page. It has the link to the training website. You click it, you enter the enrollment key for US Rowing. It's going to ask you what your member number is. That's where you enter your member number. Member numbers are important because that's what waives your fee. If you don't have a member number and someone just goes in, Safe Sport is going to charge you $20. If you're a member of US Rowing, even with the $0 membership that we're rolling out, it's going to be free. How does Safe Sport interact with a Learn to Row program? There a grace period? Yes, there is. The same way I think there is a grace period with US Rowing membership. If someone's coming to your boathouse for the first time, they're not a regular, they haven't signed up for all this, make them aware of the fact that you have a policy, again, that can be a one-pager, can just outline, here's who you go to, here's what's not to do, can be very common sense. But if someone is at your boathouse for the first time or for a very brief Learn to Row, the same way that you don't have to sign them up for a basic membership with US Rowing on day one, they do not have to bring their Safe Sport training that would take just as long to take as it would for them to step in a boat for the first time. Yeah, there's certainly a grace period for Learn to Row. So let's see, I have a couple here. Someone said confused about the refresher courses. Annually every 3 years and indexing every 4 years. But once every 4 years, the training will make you do a long training. It's annual, but in year 2, year 3, and year 4, the training takes 15 to 20 minutes. So it's annual, but for 3 of the 4 years, it's very short. If a club rower doesn't race, can they select a $0 membership? No. There is an insurance cost involved with individual membership. US Rowing pays a fee to the insurance company for every single rower that is registered in our system. So no, short answer is no. People will have to pay for a membership in order to be covered when they row. Pamela, a couple of these. Will adults need to have the training completed by December 1 to be considered, or is there going to be a little bit of a grace period as the policy goes live? That one's probably for you to answer.
So because this is the first year, we are going to give a grace period, but it's going to be very quick, because we are telling you about this now in 2021 in preparation for 2022, because we want you to be prepared. We want you to jump on it now and be ready. January moves very quickly, and before you know it, it'll be February. So I don't have an exact date of what that grace period is, but we will be allowing for some sort of grace period for January.
Oops. Someone said certificates might expire on a date that doesn't match with your US Rowing membership or waiver. Yeah, that's correct. But it will not expire with your membership. So your membership and your waiver will be on the same date, but your US rowing or your sport training connected to US rowing might be on different dates. They're not at the same time. I do believe that if you want them technically to align, I think once you take one of the trainings, whichever one you're eligible for, it does reset for that date. So if you were inclined to have them be aligned, you could do that, but it's not needed. Pamela, where will the new written safe sport policy be? Because a couple of people have said, hey, this is different than what you had sent out before. Where will I find the new policy? Where can
So
I?
right now, the 2022 policy is on the US Rowing Safe Sport page. It is currently being re-reviewed by the US Center for Safe Sport because there's been some tweaks to it. And once we have that newer one up, that will be replacing what's up there now. But there's really only maybe like 3 lines that are changing from what is currently on the website to what will be on the website, hopefully very soon. It's with the center's legal team right now.
Right. A couple of quick ones that I can answer. Someone said, what about parents gathered to watch racing? Spectators, even if they're occasionally serving out a meal, do not need to take safe sport training. If you want to use some tape to put your policy on one of the poles of your tent, you can certainly do that. We would highly recommend it, but that training is not required for them. Do clubs need their own policy in addition to the NGB policy? Yeah, it's actually been in place for the last 5 years. And we make every club certified that they have one when they renew, and we regularly audit a random amount of clubs every year, sometimes a handful, sometimes a couple dozen. So if you're not the person renewing for your club, you might have never seen it before, but we are making each club tell us. We don't need to necessarily see a link right there and then. If you are renewing your club for membership with US Rowing, you have to tick a box that says, I have my own safe sport policy, and that will certainly continue. But they may not match. Yeah, they can be customized. Yeah, absolutely. If there are things in the template that do not apply to you at all, if you're never traveling, or if your boathouse might have actually something where you want to add something because you're sharing it with a different sport, you can certainly do that. So the NGB policy, we are asking you to do certain things, but how you shape that is not, that's up to you. And you can actually send them to me or to Pamela if you want us to take a look. We're always happy to review and tell you, hey, this one's great, or think about this, or add this if you can. So if you want us to review, we're here to help with that. They can certainly be mismatched from what we do because not every club's the same. A regatta, will they be able to check rowers against, they check rowers against registration, will be a mechanism to check. Yes, it's one of the things we're working on. There will be an option in the near future, hopefully, where a club can list the attending coaches at a regatta. And with that membership and with the memberships for the coaches, we can then double check that the coaches are safe sport trained as well. So the implementation of compliance checks is something that we're working on, and it will certainly look a little more streamlined than it is right now, and that's definitely something that we're doing. Let's see. Do parent boosters who also are board members but do not actually have contact with minors, should they complete the training? Yes. We actually hear all the time about people who go to board members of their club because they consider them people in power who can do something. The board often hires and fires coaches. So I would certainly recommend that booster clubs, board members, that they go through the training so they know what to do, because if no one's ever come to your board with a safe sport complaint, you're a lucky club. I'm happy for you because that means you're doing things well or you haven't had any issues. I know, and there was a follow-up question there about what is regular contact with minor athletes. Forget about that because that was part of the old policy because it helped determine whether or not someone had to take the training. In this case, because they're regular contact or not, all adults are going to take it in order to be a member in good standing with US Rowing. Forget about the term regular contact with minor athletes because it's no longer as helpful as it once was.
I just want to interrupt. Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
Going back to that board member situation. Board members have always been asked to take safe sport training because they have always been in positions of authority, and that will not change. Background checks have always needed to be done on board members or anybody in a club in a position of authority. Board members are mandatory reporters, so if they see something and they don't say something, the center will come after them. And that's very important that people understand that if you're a coach, a board member, a staff administrator, somebody in a position of authority at a club, you're a mandatory reporter, and not saying something will get you in trouble.
Yeah. Someone said, please clarify regatta requirements for masters only. We don't have a coach. If you don't have a coach, you don't have to fill out that you have a coach. You just come to the event, and we just make sure. And if whoever on your team is an adult, they have to take the training. But if you don't have a coach, you don't have to list a coach. That's not mandatory. Couple of good questions that overlap, Pamela. In terms of the parent training, how is it accessed? And yeah, is that a safe sport training that's already available?
The parent training is available on the U.S. Center for Safe Sport website, and it is free.
Okay, and we have that. We can post that on our website.
We can post that.
Perfect. All right, then that's where we'll put it on the Safe Sport page. Another question for you that overlaps. If someone works for a school or the program is affiliated with a school, and the school has its own policy that might be more stringent than Safe Sport, do they still have to take Safe Sport? Is there a way to get it certified? I know we've been talking to Safe Sport about this, but I'm going to have you answer it.
So the answer is yes, you still need to take Safe Sport training. We have been in constant conversation with the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, talking about how many high schools, universities, colleges, et cetera, have their own training policies very similar to Safe Sport, and if a waiver could be created. They are currently in discussion about this. They have not told us yes. Right now, they're telling us that Safe Sport training still needs to happen. We are hoping down the road that there will be a waiver created.
Yeah, this is certainly an example of something where we feel as U.S. Rowing that people are certainly doing enough. Are doing enough, and then in this case, this might be a bit of an over ask on their part. Someone said, if a club is a member of U.S. Rowing, are all club members automatically members of U.S. Rowing? No, most certainly not. And there's kind of two prongs to that question. One is your organizational membership is just that. It's an organizational membership, and you might have you have coverage, like, about 2/3 of all, buy into the U.S. Rowing insurance program. But a member or someone who joins your program, they are not automatically a member of U.S. Rowing. We don't, necessarily, there's no automatic way for us to collect their data. So either you as a club or the individual has to go online and through membership.usrowing.org, join U.S. Rowing as a member to sign the waiver, and down the road to take the Safe Sport training if that applies to them. So no, people are not automatically members. And then the other part that I always want to emphasize, and if you've heard this spiel before, I apologize. There's a reason for individuals to become members of U.S. Rowing, because if your club has the U.S. Rowing insurance program, that applies to your club as an entity. But that doesn't necessarily mean that someone who goes on the water is automatically covered because you have that coverage, because not everything that happens is that something that you as the club are to blame for. Give people the example, if a member is on a dock and the dock maintenance is your club's responsibility, and the member slips and falls because it was badly maintained or some other injury, they can make a claim because you as a club are insured. At the same time, if that same member is on the same dock and they carelessly pick up an oar, swing it around, and hit a teammate in the mouth, and that teammate needs dental surgery, that is not your fault as a club. And in order for the individual who does that to be covered by our insurance, so they're not going through their homeowner's insurance for, coverage because they caused dental surgery to somebody else, that person needs to be a member of US Rowing with a signed waiver online to be enrolled. Only exception being learn to row. A paper waiver is fine if they're learn to row. But that's always the example I give people, and that's not automatic. So yeah, that's just not automatic. So not everyone is automatically a member of US Rowing. They have to go online and sign up for that. Someone said, what's the benefit of each individual member's organization having their own safe sport policy since they're bound by US Rowing's policy? What might be different? Well, for one, in terms of the policy, it lists the name of your club. It lists, perhaps who the coaches are, who your board members are, who, if you have an assigned point person, if you're a big club and you have someone who is basically like an HR person for your giant program, you want to list those kinds of contacts in there. Additionally, like I said, if your club doesn't travel, you don't have to have a page on travel. You don't have to outline across multiple pages and make members read what you would do if you travel. If you know you're not going to travel, don't put a travel or a lodging policy in there because you don't have to. So US Rowing provides a template. It has different chapters. You pick and mix the chapters that your program needs. And there might be some that you leave out there, and there might be contact information that you want to update. And yeah, a member can come directly to US Rowing if they have a concern. A member can completely bypass your club. If they don't trust anybody at the club to do what's right, they might come directly to us. But it might also really benefit your club, especially if you have minors, to make sure that you list contacts of someone they can rely on, someone that is going to be trained, someone that knows what to do, someone who is in a position where they feel comfortable going to the board and explaining, hey, this is what I'm hearing. We might need to suspend this person. So that's not something that, one size fits all in terms of what US Rowing writes. So we're telling you what you have to do. We're telling you what you have to do as a bare minimum, but there might be additional things that you want to do. So those could be chances. Couple of questions. Someone says, if your club is a member of US Rowing and for some reason there are members that are not individual members of US Rowing, do they still fall under safe sport requirement? Yeah, because you need to have a safe sport policy as a club. And I would certainly not recommend, for both legal purposes and insurance purposes, to say, hey, if you don't join US Rowing, you don't have to do any of this, because that sets you up for some really ugly liability discussions. So yeah, if your club is a member organization of US Rowing, it falls under the safe sport requirement, end of discussion. So an individual opting to not join us, it would just be a heap of trouble if something were to occur. I would more than not recommend it. I just don't do that, because that's not how it works. Is it correct to state that not members of US Rowing who are members of a club to take the training, even if you have your own insurance? Same answer, no. If your club is a member organization of US Rowing, we mandate that you have a safe sport policy, and the US Rowing requirements of those policies state that, and I mean, not US Rowing, I mean Center for Safe Sport, and like we showed at the beginning, that's the law. That's all we can ask and all we can say. Yeah, if you have adults at your club and your club is a US Rowing member organization, they have to take the training. I can't summarize it any shorter than that. Is there a time frame, Pamela, on a waiver for scholastic programs that have their own policy?
I'd ask back, what exactly are you asking? What kind of waiver?
The waiver on the, if for an exception, if you're a school that has its own stringent policy, do you need to take safe sport training? Do you know where are we in our discussion with the center?
Right now, the center requires that you take the safe sport training. There is not a waiver right now. I will go back to them again tomorrow. I mean, I swear I talk to them almost every day. They are discussing this. They know that this is an issue, not just with rowing, but with every sport. And we are all NGBs, we're asking for a waiver. It's just not there yet.
Okay.
Somebody was raising their hand. So I just want to reiterate.
Yeah. Oh yeah, go for it.
If you are raising your hand, please don't put your question in the Q&A. There are almost 200 people on this that signed up for this. So for the essence of time, writing in the Q&A is best. Thank you.
Let's see. It says someone says, you know, the necessity of the training, but I'm concerned about the limits on one-on-one contact between coaches and minors because it may also reduce opportunities for positive interactions. You know, having a personal, like one-on-one conversation. Do you have suggestions on how to preserve unique and influential relationships without running afoul of the policy? One of the suggestions the center gives is to ensure that interactions are interruptible. And in some cases, that means if someone's sitting in a hallway and there's a window they can look through, or as long as someone knows that someone's in there, you know, that might be a way to do that. The difficulty with these cases and when they pop up is always he said, she said, you know, and that's really what they're looking to avoid. Like they're looking to avoid a situation where an athlete says, well, X, Y, and Z happened. And the coach said, no, it didn't. And the question is, well, who was in the room? Well, that's just the two of them. That's going to be really tough. And it might have proved that. So that's really what they're looking to do. Pamela, I don't know if you have additional guidance on that one.
When you take the training, it often talks about observable and interruptible, meaning like in Jules' case with somebody in the room, the window's open, the door's open, somebody's in the hallway watching. There could still be a private conversation, but it's observable and interruptible. If you're on a dock and you and the coach go to a corner of the dock and everyone else is on the other side of the dock, you're in an open environment. It's observable, it's interruptible. And that's the key takeaway. So yes, the coach and the athlete can still have that conversation, but it can be interrupted if need be.
Okay. Someone said, what if a member says, I'll sign a waiver and not hold the club or U.S. Rowing responsible for stuff that happens on campus? Can they waive their rights and not join? Can they still be a member of the club? It's kind of the same answer I gave before. If you're a member of U.S. Rowing, and really if your program in any sport is under the Olympic movement, I don't think there's going to be loopholes and workarounds for people to say, I'm just not going to do this. Like they're going to have to do this. It's the law. That's what we got. I also want to emphasize for people who might be listening to this and thinking, wow, these people have lost the plot. This is not U.S. Rowing's policy. I don't think we've lost the plot. I'm very supportive of this policy. I think it addresses a lot of things that I wish did not cross our desks. Pamela and I are the people who get the phone calls, who have to guide people through very difficult circumstances. And I always hope that every additional person who takes the training, you know, hopefully is the one that keeps one of these off my desk. So there's not going to be loopholes like that. I don't think people can just say the law doesn't apply to me. That's the best I can do.
And the training, just to reiterate, the training is about educating people so that you can recognize what misconduct is and you could recognize how to stop it.
Right.
You know, we're not trying to punish you and make you do this thing because you don't want to. It's important for all athletes, for all Olympic movements.
Someone said how to address the interruptible aspect for things like lessons on the water. Well, that's a public setting. They're not overly worried about that. Like if you say it's a different sport and a coach is throwing a ball back and forth with an athlete at a different corner of the field, that's interruptible and open enough of a setting. Same thing, I think, for our sport specifically. If someone's out on the water with a rower and they're out on the river where other rowers might be, other people enjoying the water, that is you know, good enough for that. And sure, run into people in the hallway where there's no one else who can see you. I think what they're really trying to ensure is that clubs think through where and how people interact and just make sure that there isn't a consistent situation where people are cornered or people end up alone with someone and no one else knows that they're there. That's that, you know, like obviously it's important to think it through, but we also don't want people to overthink it. Someone said, if my scholastic team only rows in the spring, do we need to complete the training this winter? Not necessarily. I mean, we want people to be compliant for when the activities are occurring. So if they're just compliant by the time, if they're compliant by the time the practices pick up and the meetings start, that's fine. I mean, the same thing like members who join later or members who haven't renewed in a while because of, say, COVID, and they're now coming back. Those people, you know, they join whenever they join. You know, let's see what else. What other questions? Someone said, can we walk me through an example again of when club insurance does not cover a person that was not a U.S. rowing individual member? Yeah, well, to give, you know, I always just make up scenarios to kind of give you an idea, but if you have members who go out on the water and they can take a boat and row, and there's not a coach, there's no club involvement except they're a member of your club, that's how they get the boat, but their actions are their actions once they leave the dock. If that person bumps into a kayaker and that person's boat is damaged, or they are injured because they hit them pretty hard, you as a club are not responsible for the actions of that person necessarily. First and foremost, the person who hit someone, that's the person they're going to go to first. You be a U.S. rowing member and have a signed waiver on file with us for our insurance to say, all right, we knew everything. This person had gone through, they signed the membership agreement, they knew the rules, they did all the steps, but still, hey, something happens, and they happen, we're going to insure this person. If U.S. Rowing has no record of that person, they haven't paid any dues, and this can be a basic membership, that's fine. They haven't paid any dues. Our insurance is going to say, well, this is a complete stranger until they injured someone. Why would we pay? So it's you know, it's the same thing with car insurance. If you buy a new car and you don't insurance and you hit someone, you can't then show up and say, well, I meant to sign up. Do this. This is the same thing. If we don't know who a person is and they're not enrolled in the program, they're not insured for the actions that they're to blame for. That's why the memberships are needed. Someone said this may feel significant, but much of what's being discussed has been in place for several years. The material update is just that all adults must take the training. It's a step forward to protecting all participants. It's not about youth. I realize as I'm reading it, that's not a question. That's more of a compliment, and I thank you. I agree. I think, sadly, to some degree, these changes motivating more people to do this and to have to take the training are the result of what they're seeing. They're being almost overwhelmed by cases. I think what we're seeing in media from other sports, what we're hearing from the center in terms of the volume of cases that come in, it turns out there are a lot of people who don't know what they do when they say something or when they see something and they wish they had said something. There, I think, even when you look at the big cases that have been in the news, there were a lot of people along the way who said, if only I had known who to go to, or if only this person had taken me seriously. By implementing training for more people, the onus on getting this right is spread people. And it only takes one person who knows that they have to report it to go to law enforcement or to go to the board of their club and say, here's what I heard, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I think you need to do because I took this training. If it stops one case, I'm happy that we did it. Can organizations standardize the time of year for the training? Yeah, they can. Yeah, you can do that. The training, I think you can reset the date of the training or when you take the training by taking it a little early. So the next training becomes available the moment you complete the last one, but you don't have to take it right away, or you don't have to take it for another year. But if you want to take it a little earlier, say you did it in March and now you want to take the next one in January, so you know it's every January, you can certainly do that.
Just to give you an idea of what we do here for staff at US Rowing, January is what we call compliance month. We all take our safe sport training then. We all, if it's in our time frame, we all do our background checks, and all of our compliance happens in January.
Yep. Someone said, is it acceptable if another coach or adult is not available that another rower is present? Yeah. So it's a good thing to emphasize. when we talk about interruptible or not one-on-one minor and adult, it can be two minors and the adult. Like if the coach is like, hey, I need to do team meetings and I want the coxswain to sit in on all of this because the coxswain leads my team. Free to do that. Yeah, it doesn't have to be another coach or even another adult. As long as there are 3 people in the room, that's certainly a recommendation. That's fine. That's fine with the policy. How frequently must background checks be conducted? That's once every 2 years. Short answer on that one. And Pamela, but you might have said it, so if you could repeat it, you mentioned some differences for healthcare workers. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the center created training specifically for healthcare workers, and that does count towards your safe sport training.
Oh, great. Is that shorter? Is it just different content? Because
it's just different. It's just different.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And they both are acceptable.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, we're really just minutes away from our cutoff time here, and we don't want to take much more of your time if not necessary. And we're through all the questions in the Q&A. So if there are no other questions, or maybe we can do 1 or 2 more, we're gonna.
So I'll just quickly go through some Q&As that were not answered.
Go for it.
Large group training, I believe we answered that. No, each member must take individual training. The training currently shows in the organization's roster in the applicable adult, but come January, that will show more cleanly in the active roster. Training is available for people with disabilities. There's training for developmental delays. There's training for people with hearing and vision impaired. You would just have to reach out to the center to take that training. Training needs to happen annually. We already discussed that. The only people that need to take background checks, that has not changed. That is still only for people in positions of authority, being coaches, administrators, board members, staff, etc. Not for athlete only type people. Your safe sport certificate will be visible to US Rowing through, if you have an event through Regatta Central, it will show on the Regatta Central compliance page, or US Rowing can look it up on the membership database. So you wouldn't have to bring your certificate with you to an event to prove. We did mention the tracking of the safe sport training in the beginning. That is the responsibility of the LOC or the member organization. Safe Sport audited an event for us this past summer. They were at Summer Nationals. They are auditing more and more events for every sport across the board. And if they happen to be at one of our events, or even one of our sanctioned events that US Rowing is not present at, but it's happening, the center may be there. They may ask questions. They just want to make sure that people are prepared.
Okay. I'm going to do 2 things that just popped up in Q&A. Three actually. One is a note from Rosa Kemp, who's on our team. I got something wrong earlier. The US Rowing U19 system does require safe sport compliance and training to participate, even if you're a minor, including minor selection camps, development camps, ODP, and high performance camps. So thank you for clarifying that, Rosa. I appreciate it. So someone said, if everyone in a US Rowing member club must separately become an individual paid member to take safe sport. Well, that's something we touched on earlier. If you're not a rower, if you're a rower, yes, you have to become a paid member of US Rowing in order to be covered. And yes, your safe sport training is free with any level membership. What we are actually introducing as a service to members, to program directors, people like everyone on this call, is that as soon as possible, we are rolling out a no-cost membership. It will not cover any rowing activities in the sense that you're a rower or you're a coach. Those will still be paid memberships, but we are rolling out a $0 membership so that if you have volunteers or you have, you have people on your board who are just members, they can pay $0 moving forward. It will still give them a member number, and that member number is sufficient to take the safe sport training. So Yeah, so yes, people will become members, but we will have a special membership that will basically be a free Safe Sport membership. So to clarify, for adult learn to row classes, do they have to take Safe Sport if they're not members yet? No. We don't want to commit necessarily to a hard grace period, too much. In this case, it's one of those kind of use your judgment. But if someone's really coming to your boathouse just a couple times, and they're really in your learn to row program, I would not necessarily mandate that. If they join you as a more regular member, then yes.
I would say in that case, treat Safe Sport training the way you treat membership and waiver. Learn to row, adult athletes typically sign a paper waiver. They're not becoming members until they're there on a regular basis.
Yeah. Someone said, if I host a virtual regatta, do participants need to take Safe Sport? Well, if they're adult members of US Rowing, yes. I mean, that's what the policy is, but not, you're asking about international competitors as well. No, not international competitors, but they already have their own types of membership that are a little different, and they don't, as you might know, if they're members in their home country, they don't pay for a membership. So no to international competitors. A good question on everyone else. Generally, I would say, if someone just joined to do this one event, the answer would probably be no. But if they're a regular rower, and the answer is going to be yes, because they're already going to need it for all the other activities. The difference between the enrollment key and the member number. The enrollment key connects you to US Rowing, and then the member number is your unique number so that we can track whether or not you completed the training. So when you go to safesporttrained.org, it's one word, safesporttrained.org, there's an enrollment key button. You click it, you enter the enrollment key. That gets you immediately connected to US Rowing when you're making your profile. As part of the profile, it's going to ask you for a member number. If you leave the member number blank, which I think you can do, it actually means that US Rowing can't track whether or not you did it. It's not going to show up on the roster for your club. We might actually be able to look it up manually, but it's not going to automatically put you on anyone's roster as having done it. So that's the difference between the key and the member number. Pamela, this one might be for you. Do adults overseeing non-rowing activities at the same facility have to be trained, or is posting the signs adequate?
If you have absolutely nothing to do with rowing, then you do not have to take training. But yeah, you should just be aware of the policy.
Okay. Do we as the club have to track the Safe Sport certificates for all the members, or is US Rowing tracking it? Well, it's going to be both. We're going to, every club has access to the roster through the US Rowing membership portal. And in that roster, you're going to be able to see who did and didn't do it if they're an adult. There's going to be a check mark if people are adults in a special column that is currently being coded so that this is in place by the time this policy goes live. So really, when it comes to competition and things like that, that's a very common checkpoint, both for US Rowing as well as for the club itself. But you are going to have a wicket very simple, because it's going to show up yes or no in your roster moving forward. And US Rowing is certainly going to have some eyes on that as well. And in fact, this is probably a good moment to promote it, Pamela. Starting tomorrow, we are posting a job for a membership compliance coordinator. We're hiring someone who's going to help Pamela and myself with keeping an eye on this and helping clubs out with, making sure that they're compliant with memberships, with Safe Sport, with all the things we talked about tonight. So if you or someone great who loves data spreadsheets and who you think would like Pamela and I as colleagues, we are hiring a coordinator to join us. It's a remote position. So reach out to us. Look at our website when it's live. It's going to be probably tomorrow. It's going to be posted. So if this speaks to you and you would like to do webinars like this with us and be online, we're posting a really cool full-time job for that literally today, tomorrow. Does a coach who is employed by a school require an additional background check through Safe Sport? No. If someone has done a background check, that background check is sufficient. We don't mandate that the background check. We don't mandate that the background check is through NCSI. If someone passes an acceptable background check, that background check is fine. Someone says we rent a space shared with other clubs who are not US Rowing members. How does that affect us? You have to be compliant. The other members, if they're not members, they're not under our jurisdiction if they're not members as a club. So if there are clubs that are under US Rowing jurisdiction, they, in their own way have to be compliant. But if they are not organizational members of US Rowing, there's no effect on you. It's you who has to be compliant, make them do anything. I'm going to take one last question or one last comment. Can we do like a learn to row waiver or kind of safe sport wording online? Like, can we do like a one pager, Pamela, that would work for learn to row? We don't have one, but I'm sure we can put one together.
We currently have something on the website, which is a 2-page PDF of the basics of what this is all about. And to add to that, somebody asked if all of these Q&A questions will be on our website. We are in the process of totally revamping our Safe Sport page because it was created several years ago under the old policy, and we want to make it more relatable to the new policy. It will definitely be updated by the time the new policy goes into effect. It's a work in process. Another reason why we need to hire this person that Jules mentioned. So we're working on it.
And then someone said, will questions asked and answered here be posted on the US Rowing website? We can certainly do a written FAQ, but we're also going to post a recording of tonight's meeting. So if you had specific questions or you want to rewatch, you can do that as well, because we will be posting this on our website very soon. Also, and I always want to emphasize this, if you have a very specific question, reach out to us. Let us know, because we understand that there are very specific scenarios, and we want to make sure that you feel confident with what you're doing, and that if you feel better about not missing anything, that's why we're here. So I think our emails were on screen at some point. We're on the US Rowing directory. You may already know who we are and see us at Regattas from time to time, but don't hesitate to. That's not a burden for us. We want to help. This is one of the things we really deeply care about. So yeah.
So again, I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight. As Jules mentioned, we will be posting this webinar as well as the slideshow on our website. And feel free to reach out. We're here for you. And thank you for joining us tonight.